Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed.
Yesterday, history was made. With the opening of the United States Embassy in Jerusalem comes a new era for Israelis, one that has them celebrating just how far their country has come. Though the move itself may be mostly symbolic, it's a gesture that's been felt all over the Jewish state.
For many Americans, the official recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital is a formality that reflects a long-held truth.
From King David's time to our own, President Trump has now etched his name into the ineffaceable story of Jerusalem. And as the president said just this morning, today is nothing less than a great day for Israel.
As for Israelis, Trump's decision to unilaterally recognize the city as their capital changes little on the ground. For decades, Jerusalem has already been home to the government and is the most populated city in the state of Israel. Not everyone is taking things so well, however. At least 100 Jewish American protesters rallied in Washington, D.C., criticizing the new embassy move. For them, the decision ends Palestinian dreams for the state of their own and ignites a promise of even more bloodshed to come.
You know, I would ask Jared Kushner how the Israeli military killing 40 Palestinian protesters today in Gaza helps build peace. I would ask him how the dispossession and demolition of Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem brings peace. And how he sees the U.S. allying with the most far-right elements in Israel, how that's going to help bring peace, because we know that peace will only come with peace.
Jared Kushner touched upon this issue, though, during his address at the embassy yesterday. For Trump's son-in-law, who was once his closest advisor, those unhappy with the decision are merely part of the problem.
As we have seen from the protests of the last month and even today, those provoking violence are part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Yesterday was the final day of the Hamas-sponsored March of Return protests. Earlier this week, these rallies hit a bloody climax, coinciding with the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. The army responded with live fire to contain tens of thousands of Palestinians at the border who erupted into violence. But yesterday, only a few thousand showed up at the border. Reports suggest that Hamas actually curbed yesterday's violence in exchange for a relief from IDF retaliation. Things may be calming on the Gaza front, but in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Israeli security forces are worried that things are only ramping up. The aftermath of Hamas's 6-week rally has sent shockwaves throughout the world and saw countless attempts by Palestinians to either overrun or destroy the security barrier with Israel. The international community has largely condemned Israel for using live fire to contain the violence. On the day the U.S. Embassy opened, at least 58 Palestinians were killed in clashes with the IDF. The White House has defended Israel's right to defend itself, and President Trump's defense secretary is still waiting for the full picture before assigning any blame.
Was Hamas to blame for the violence yesterday in Gaza, and did the Israelis military handle that situation appropriately? And
I'd prefer not to address that issue right now until we've had all the facts in.
The unrest has sent American relations with the Palestinian Authority to a new low. The PA has just recalled its Palestinian envoy from Washington, D.C., all in response to what they say are war crimes against the Palestinian people.
We succeeded in bringing the 18th signature to convene the Human Rights Council on Friday to establish an international investigation inquiry group. Also, we are preparing the files to go to the International Court of Justice in regards to the President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Well, the last few days have seen much bloodshed on the Gaza-Israeli border following clashes between Palestinian demonstrators and the IDF. As the Palestinian March of Return protest continues, 62 Palestinians have reportedly been killed in the clashes, and according to Hamas, 53 of them were actually members of the terror group. The IDF is claiming that this is proof that Israel is specifically targeting violent protesters and that Hamas is behind the riots. Israel hasn't released its own official death toll, but officials have questioned the accuracy of the number provided by Hamas's Gazan Health Ministry. Israel's continued to claim that most of the people killed either belong to Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. According to the IDF, among the dead are 8 members of a cell of armed Hamas operatives who were shot down in a gun battle as they sought to breach the Gaza border fence. Israel is blaming Hamas for the deadly violence, saying the terror group is encouraging violence under the cover of so-called peaceful protests. For Hamas, the March of Return protest is a culmination of a weeks-long campaign to try to break Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. Israel claims the blockade is necessary to prevent the terror group from getting its hands on weaponry and attacking Israelis. The international community is accusing Israel of abusing lethal force to deal with the protesters, but Israeli officials say they're doing what they need to do to protect the Israeli people. For now, Hamas says the protests will continue in a weekly format, but that they have now reached a deal with Egypt to stop the riots from escalating. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar says Hamas has told Egypt that it's committed to preventing the riots from evolving into a military clash, but that it doesn't mean that Hamas will stop using armed resistance. All right, unfortunately, we're going to have to move to some darker news. Explosions rattled the Gaza border last night when the IDF destroyed yet another terror tunnel threatening to breach Israeli territory. This is the 9th such tunnel that the army has destroyed within the past year. The structure was apparently mere meters from entering Israeli soil, meaning the airstrikes actually targeted the tunnel inside the Gaza Strip. The IDF has confirmed that the tunnel has been successfully neutralized, though some of the structure itself survived the bombing. This is sure to stoke tensions already escalating just 24 hours before the U.S. Embassy officially opens tomorrow in Jerusalem. That ceremony will be paralleled by the climax of the Hamas-sponsored March of Return protest rally along the Gaza border. These bloody clashes have seen more than 40 Palestinians killed by Israeli bullets as protests continue to get increasingly violent. Top security officials say tomorrow's expected turnout will be the bloodiest and most chaotic yet. Hamas leaders say thousands of Palestinians will be overrunning the security barrier and flooding into Israel to reclaim it for Palestine. The IDF has boosted security along the border to prepare for the worst, and security in the holy city of Jerusalem has also been doubled ahead of tomorrow's embassy event. We could be seeing a breakout of protests in East Jerusalem and the West Bank as well. Needless to say, Israelis are bracing for the worst, even as they celebrate the symbolic significance of tomorrow's embassy move. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump defied international consensus and withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal. Israeli leaders hailed the decision, while others accused Trump of putting the world on a path to war with no plan B. Well, ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with an update on where things now stand with the JCPOA.
Thanks, Tasha.
Well, obviously this has been a historic week with all the celebrations surrounding the U.S. Embassy opening in Jerusalem and, of course, the turmoil along the Gaza border. It feels like the Iran deal has kind of slipped into the back of people's minds.
Sure, but at the same time, even during those festivities on Tuesday, the Iran deal was kind of, the elephant in the room. When U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin took the stage on Tuesday morning, he actually cited his background in global finance and pitched the sanctions approach that Trump prefers with this. It works, is what he said to the audience. The United States has indeed resumed those sanctions. Mnuchin's department actually just singled out the head of Iran's central bank as a terrorist and accused him of laundering terror funds through an Iraqi bank to Hezbollah.
Well, Europe has, of course, been scrambling to keep Iran in the deal, even without the United States. Right. Is it too early to tell if that's going to happen?
Yeah, too early to tell, I'd say so. So yesterday was really actually the big day, the first real big day of renegotiations between the EU and Iran. Now, sometimes there is a little bit of optimism in Europe because so far Iran has expressed a certain willingness to work things out. And there's also the fact that even with the U.S. sanctions in place, if Europe, China, and Russia band together, Iran may escape the brunt of the economic blow there. But as always, it is never so simple as that because the U.S. will likely be trying to punish those countries with sanctions of their own. Yeah. And that could go either way. That could either force Europe's hand and cause the deal to collapse, or it could just alienate America from its allies and isolate the American economy.
Well, the deal itself is one thing, but let's not forget that last week we also saw perhaps the biggest offenses by Iran on Israel ever. I mean, last week the regime launched dozens of missiles from Syria at army bases in northern Israel, prompting the IDF to counterattack and essentially decimate legitimate Iran's presence there. So how does this threat on the border factor in?
Yeah, I mean, it's all related. I mean, that's actually something that Merkel just spoke about in defending Europe's decision to try and save the deal. And here's what she says.
Kann man besser sprechen, wenn man dieses Abkommen kündigt? Oder kann man besser sprechen, wenn man in diesem Abkommen bleibt? Wir glauben, dass man besser miteinander weiterreden kann und muss. Ich sage das ausdrücklich, weil das ballistische Raketenprogramm eine Gefährdung auch gerade der Sicherheit Israels ist. Wir glauben, man kann besser sprechen, wenn man in diesem Abkommen bleibt, meine Damen und Herren.
Right, so specifically calling out Israeli security interests there. And Merkel actually spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu last night on the phone. Of course, he's lobbying Europe to follow Trump's example and allow the deal to collapse. And they certainly talked about the EU's big meeting with Iran yesterday. The rumor is that Iran wants to see a deal happen within the next few weeks, or they'll walk. And likely that would mean that they would resume their nuclear activity thereafter.
Well, Israel has made it very clear that Iran will never obtain a nuclear warhead. And now that the U.S. is out of the deal, we'll just have to wait and see which course of action Israel will eventually have to take. All right, thanks for the update, Brett.
Of course.
The dust is finally beginning to fully settle after last week's massive exchange of fire between Iranian and Israeli forces in Syria. The IDF retaliated with its largest yet operation after dozens of Iranian missiles targeted army bases in northern Israel. And we now believe that those airstrikes killed at least 27 pro-regime fighters, including 11 Iranian nationals. These numbers come from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Tehran has not confirmed whether the reports are accurate. For the moment, IDF officials are cautiously optimistic that the current round of fighting is over. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has confirmed that while Iran is still capable of launching more strikes from Syria, Israel's massive attack has wiped out nearly all of Iran's military infrastructure in the region. Most believe Iran has probably gotten the message that its forces are outmatched and won't be looking for another short-term fight. Despite this optimism, Israel still faces a long-term Iranian threat now that the JCPOA nuclear deal is in limbo. If the deal collapses in the wake of President Donald Trump's controversial decision to withdraw, Iran will likely resume its pursuit of nuclear weapons. Israel would obviously not tolerate such an outcome and is likely prepping its own game plan to prevent such a scenario. All right, Jerusalem was quite the sight to see yesterday. Thousands of Israeli youth marched through the capital's old city as part of the annual flag dance parade to the Western Wall, a tradition that marks the 51st anniversary of Israel's capture of East Jerusalem.
And I'm here to celebrate the freedom of Jerusalem for the last 51 years, but actually Jerusalem was ours for the last 3,000 years. So for 19 years it was occupied by the Jordanians. Now it's ours, and that's it. So we celebrate it.
Israel seized East Jerusalem and the West Bank from Jordan in the 1967 Middle East War. The Jewish state then annexed East Jerusalem but declared the entire city the undivided capital of Israel. Until today, every year thousands of Israelis participate in the Jerusalem Day March to celebrate the historic occasion. But the Palestinians aren't happy about it. They want East Jerusalem to be the capital of their future state and believe these festivities threaten that reality. Indeed, Israeli police deployed thousands of security officials across the city ahead of the march yesterday to make sure that there was no violence.
More than 3,000 police officers are located, both border police units, undercover agents and special patrol units to prevent any incident. And these are part of all the security measures taking place in Jerusalem this week.
About 30,000 people took part in this year's Jerusalem Day Parade, a march that comes just one day before the opening of the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Israelis are celebrating the big move of the embassy from Tel Aviv today because it breaks decades of U.S. policy and officially recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Well, 2 days ago, the United States made history as the first nation to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move its embassy accordingly to the Holy City. Well, it only took 48 hours for another country to step up to the plate. Today, Guatemala has followed President Trump's example and is opening its new embassy in Jerusalem, too.
Primer Ministro Netanyahu, sepa que el pueblo de Guatemala será siempre un amigo para su país y a partir de hoy, con un hecho importante que es el retorno de la Embajada de Guatemala a Jerusalén, estamos reafirmando nuestros lazos de amistad y hermandad hacia el próspero pueblo de Israel.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has just greeted Guatemala's President Jimmy Morales at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. While not as high-profile as the American ceremony on Monday, today is nevertheless a historic day for Israelis.
Shalom, buenos dias. That's the end of my Spanish for now. And yesterday, we opened the American embassy in Jerusalem 2 days ago. And it's not a coincidence that Guatemala is opening its embassy in Jerusalem right among the first. You were always among the first. Always among the first.
Guatemala and Israel have long shared deep diplomatic ties. The country actually had its original embassy based in Jerusalem back in 1959, the first in the world to do so. It was later relocated to Tel Aviv after international mandates rejected Israel's claim to East Jerusalem. That all changed last December, however, with President Trump's decision to recognize the Holy City as Israel's capital. The decision was deeply criticized by most of the world, who feel that Jerusalem's fate should be left to Israel and the Palestinians in peace talks, and not by a third party. Guatemala, however, backed Trump's decision mere days after his landmark speech. Today's celebration is yet another momentous gesture for Israelis, and Paraguay is expected to follow in these footsteps by the end of the month.
I know we can't say this enough. Israelis are still celebrating Netta Barzilai's amazing win at the 2018 Eurovision Song Competition. Her victory means that next year's showdown will take place in Jerusalem, but because of this already, people are calling for a boycott of Eurovision 2019. Dublin Mayor Michael McDoncha says Ireland shouldn't even send a contestant.
It's only been a few days since Barzilai chicken danced her way into the hearts of audiences around the world and took first place for her hit song Toy. Barzilai's victory is actually also a big win over the BDS campaign, which boycotted hard against the Israeli singer from the start. But when the event comes to Jerusalem next year, Dublin's mayor says Ireland should join the cultural boycott and refuse to compete in order to show solidarity with the Palestinian people. The mayor says, quote, "I think the horrific ordeal of the Palestinian people needs to be highlighted," end quote. Doncha's words shouldn't come as much of a surprise, though. As the mayor of Dublin, he oversaw the passing of 2 resolutions endorsing the cultural boycott of Israel. In fact, just a few weeks ago, Doncha actually came to Israel, and Israeli authorities attempted to block him from entering the country because of his BDS track record. Due to an error in the spelling of his name on the travel documents, however, they were unsuccessful in blocking him. But for most, Barzilai's win, which is Israel's first victory in 20 years at Eurovision, is seen as its own kind of peace envoy to the world. Israelis are hopeful that Barzilai's message and the message of countless artists can trump hatred and succeed where politics and politicians often have not.
All right, well, this may be the medical breakthrough the world has been praying for. Israeli researchers say they've just created an incredible new molecule to combat cancer. The team claims it can stop the growth of cancer cells dead in their tracks. But not only that, it can even reprogram those cells into harmless, non-cancerous ones. This would be an incredible game-changing breakthrough. The molecule, known as siRNA, has already been tested successfully on brain, lung, and breast cancer models in mice here in Israel. Researchers at the Ben Gurion University say they cracked this after isolating a specific protein, the VDAC1, which is overly abundant in cancerous cells and tumors. They developed a molecule that forces a body to slow down its processing of the protein. The results were simply astounding. Tumors in mice actually began shrinking, and cells began reverting to their original normal state. The treatment seems to have no apparent side effects when exposed to healthy cells, and best of all, it apparently attacks the root of all kinds of cancer cells, meaning this could be an entirely new model for fighting cancer in all its deadly forms. The Israeli team will soon publish a complete study on their findings in an effort to bring this treatment to the next level. There's still more work to go, but at this rate, there may be a real reason to feel hopeful. And up now, ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh with the top 5 of the week.
The city of Tel Aviv is unbelievably rich in culture, with great galleries, museums, and most exciting of all, events that constantly revamp the city. So I'm here to give you guys the secret Tel Aviv-inspired top 5 cultural events to look forward to. First on our list is the Dragon Boat Festival, usually held in the month of May. This is a China-style celebration with dragon-disguised boats and Chinese music. Held at the Palcayolcon, anyone and everyone can come participate. Just grab a paddle, hop on, and take part in one of the many rowing contests. Second and most famous on the list is the Tel Aviv Pride Week. Tel Aviv is one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world, so one parade just isn't enough. Get ready for a whole week of colorful and crazy parties, raves, parades, and all-around unforgettable experience. This rainbow-filled week is one you'll regret missing, so get your flight to the city that never sleeps and prepare to have the absolute time of your life. Third up is the TLV Fest, usually held in June and typically coincides with Pride Week. This festival is a celebration of all LGBT films and documentaries from around the world. This unique experience allows you to really learn more about the LGBTQ community in an effort to raise awareness. So if you're already heading to the Holy Land for Pride Week, you won't want to miss this festival. Laila Levan, or White Night, is one of the biggest events of the year here in Tel Aviv and is one of the 3 nights of year where anyone and everyone can play their music loud into the night. All shops and restaurants are open till the morning and parties go on all night long. The whole city turns into one big party and everyone's roaming the streets till sunrise. Basically another excuse to stay up and explore the streets of Tel Aviv. Last on our list, I have mentioned before but deserves a second look, the Tel Aviv Night Run, a 10-kilometer race for anyone and everyone over the age of 14. What makes this run unique from others is the fact that it's held at night. Runners paint their face, wear neon-colored clothes, and get ready to race. This event brings together the city of Tel Aviv. Whether participating in the race or cheering on the sideline, it's hard to miss the Tel Aviv Night Run. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.